Number one is what is called formal equivalence. Formal equivalence. And that's simply a theological translation term that means word for word. When people are translating the Bible and looking at the original manuscripts, they try to translate word for word. And many that would be listening to me would say, well, that's the only way that people should interpret the Bible. And anybody that's not interpreting the Bible that way is corrupted. Well, let me give you an example of why what you're saying is unlearned. Let me just use a phrase in modern English. Sometimes the secular world, I think, I might be wrong, but I think this dates back to early theater. But they believe saying good luck was bad luck. And so a phrase was used that has become popular, is still around today in the English culture, English language, break a leg. And that would be said instead of good luck because their IQ was so low they thought saying good luck meant bad luck. I mean, there's no way of explaining that other than ignorance. And so somebody invented the colloquialism, break a leg. So what you have to understand in translation is these types of colloquialisms are not just in the English language, they're in all languages, including Hebrew, including Greek, including Aramaic. There are certain phrases that are used that if you translated them literally, you would not have an accurate interpretation. You would have a colloquialism that does not translate to a modern reader. So if we were translating from a passage in the Bible where they said break the leg in the original manuscripts in Hebrew, meaning good luck, translators would not translate that as break your leg or have somebody break your leg. They would say, you know, good luck or good fortune or may favor, etc. So just a quick insight, and that's a deep subject for me to give you one single illustration. But people who say, anybody who doesn't interpret the Bible from formal equivalence and word by word focus in their process of interpretation is corrupting the scripture. Again, you're dealing with individuals who are making comments on a level of subject matter they're not qualified to speak. I hope that's clear. So translators have the difficult assignment of looking at original text. Those that do word by word sometimes do not do us a favor in translation because their unbending dedication to word by word translation should be looked at from the full context and sometimes the full narrative, because we don't communicate word by word. We communicate expressing thoughts, using words to express thoughts. I'll not get deep into that because I don't want to bore you. So formal equivalence, if you're taking notes, write that down. Here's how Bibles are translated. Teams are put together and a decision is made, and some teams decide. And it's usually teams of hundreds of people, dedicated scholars, and they carefully and meticulously go over original manuscripts to give us the most accurate translation in our language that would match the language that they're translating from. Word by word is called formal equivalence. The second is dynamic equivalence. And those would be teams of translators who are translating a Bible, and their thought is we want to be as accurate to word by word, formal equivalence, as is possible for us with these manuscripts, but we understand that because of languages changing, even in the English language, there are some words in our language today that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, had totally different meanings. So dynamic equivalence, thought by thought, they go into the study with the same standard. As much as is possible, let's be word for word accurate, but let's be willing to take a step back and look at the entire thought that the Apostle Paul or Jesus or Moses or whatever Bible passage they're translating, what did the original author really mean to say, and translate that as accurately as possible. That's what dynamic equivalence is, or thought for thought. And the third way that they translate, oftentimes considered the lesser of the three as far as accuracy goes, is paraphrase. So when you see a Bible and it says paraphrase, it doesn't mean that it's corrupted, but it probably is not going to have the higher standards of accuracy of formal equivalence and dynamic equivalence. With that said, let's close by going over the 5 most accurate translations of the Bible. Number 1, the New American Standard Bible, oftentimes called the NASB. New American Standard of the Bible. The NASB is a Bible that stays as close as possible to the literal reading of the original text. It would be considered formal equivalence. That's why I took the time to teach you those 3 methods that translators use. Formal equivalence, word by word. Dynamic equivalence, thought by thought. Paraphrase, a little looser use of defining and adding to and conveying passages. But the NASB is a formal equivalence, word by word translation with a focus of staying as close to the literal text as was absolutely possible. At the same time, they wanted to preserve the literary structure, and as with all translations, they also wanted it to be readable. Because the wrestling match in translation is if your formal equivalent translation of being word for word is so strict and unbending, you can get statements that are accurate, but at the same time, at the expense of being readable to the individual who's trying to read and study the scripture. The NASB is often at the front of the list with serious Bible students. I'll just tell you that right up front. In many Bible colleges, in many seminaries, many scholars, many professors, many PhDs, in whatever their particular branch of study might be in theology, the NASB, the New American Standard Bible, is at the top of the list of considered to be perhaps the most accurate Bible available to us today. Many Bible translators will concede, however, that the NASB, though it holds the title by most as the most accurate modern Bible available to us today, those same individuals will say that it is not the most readable Bible available today. It was originally published in 1963. It was revised in 1995. And one of the things that makes it so accurate was that they used and had available to them the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't have time to teach on the Dead Sea Scrolls, but if you've heard me in the past, you're aware of the fact that the Dead Sea Scrolls are the most accurate manuscripts available for the Old Testament and were only discovered in modern history. The Dead Sea Scrolls are considered to be the best manuscripts available for the Old Testament. And for example, because they were discovered in recent years, the scholars and the team of 47 that put together the King James Version of the Bible, which I love, they had no access to that. It wasn't discovered until quite some time later. And so for that reason, because the NASB scholars had access to the Dead Sea Scrolls and put such a firm emphasis upon the focus of interpreting from the Dead Sea Scrolls, it is the reason why many scholars consider the New American Standard Bible as the most accurate scholarly Bible available today. But again, it does not hold the title as the most readable. Now, as I list these, I'm not putting a real emphasis upon, as I go down through this list, number 1's the best, number 5's the worst. That's not what this is about. I did put NASB up front and told you that it is considered as the most accurate Bible available to us today. But as we go down through this list, just remember, this list does not degrade. As I go down, I'm not saying that number 2 is less than 1, number 3 is less than 2, and so forth. These are all highly recommended Bibles, and I get that question all the time from people who are coming back to Christ and finding Christ through the ministry of Lost Lamb Association. You know, it's one of the most common questions that I hear. I'm a brand new Christian. I don't own a Bible. What would you recommend? We get that question here all the time. Number 2, the King James Version of the Bible, which is what I grew up on from my childhood into this day. I love, honor, and appreciate the King James Version. Now, in reading the comments, because our videos have millions and millions of views, there are some people who listen only in part to some of the things that I've taught in the past, and they have taken some statements out of context and feel that I'm a critic of the King James Version of the Bible. This study proves that they have not thought it through or have not listened from beginning to end, because I am listing it as one of the most accurate translations of the Bible that you can trust and read and own. I love the King James Version of the Bible, but I have multiple critics in the comments on our channel that compare me to the Antichrist, because I would dare to say that because the King James Version was written in 1611 and didn't have access to all of the manuscripts that are available today, that I'm trying to rip the King James Version out of history and out of the Christian church, and I must be possessed by the same spirit as the Antichrist. And I'm usually not bothered by people who criticize me with IQs above, well, Lord, I apologize. I ask you to forgive me for what I was about to say, and thank you that I didn't say it. But I'll just leave that alone. Let me give you another example. When the King James Version of the Bible was written, this is to help you understand, I'm not criticizing it, but if you wonder why there is criticism against the King James Version by some scholars, the main thing is this. They only had 47 scholars, and quite frankly, they weren't all scholars. King James appointed 47 men. Some of them were scholars, many of them were clergymen. But they only had a small team, and by the standards of translation, like for example, a modern Bible, there might be 50 people assigned to just interpreting one single book of the Bible. For example, somebody might be assigned to interpret the book of Hebrews, and they may assign a large number of New Testament scholars. You would have to, first of all, be a New Testament scholar. You'd have to be a Greek scholar. And they assign entire teams in a modern Bible just for one book. The King James Version only had 47 on the entire team of interpreting the Bible. They did not have completed manuscripts like we have today, and some were scholars, some were simply respected clergy. They did a phenomenal job for what they had. This is not my criticism. I'm just telling you this is a criticism that exists in the world of academia concerning the King James Version of the Bible. Perhaps the second greatest criticism, again, not me, I love it, I read it, I own it, I grew up on it, I've memorized, I think, close to 2,000 verses out of it. But many who are critical of the King James Version would also point out that in the original manuscripts, the name Jehovah was mentioned over close to 8,000 times. The name of God in original manuscript mentioned almost 8,000 times. For whatever reason, the King James Version translators of the Bible only included it in the King James Bible 7 times. So I'm just teaching you. You're going to hear this criticism if you talk to individuals that perhaps prefer another modern version. You'll hear these criticisms against the King James Version. Does that discount, listen, does that discount the King James Version from being an accurate, readable, precious Bible? Absolutely not. I am including it today. So anyone who would level criticism, before you go into the comments and you attack me for trying... because they are almost identical, other than, as you know, the 1611 version of the King James Version of the Bible was written in Elizabethan English, and many people find that language to be archaic, difficult to read. Many find it as a hurdle for brand new believers who are, sadly, in our country, grew up in an educational system where upon graduation, some of our students, in fact, in this country, the last data I saw was over 23% of our students graduating from high school in America are functionally illiterate. Now, that's not totally illiterate, functionally illiterate. They have a difficult time reading, writing, and understanding basic English. And any teacher that's listening to me knows that's not an exaggeration. So as believers, as ministry leaders, as the founder of Lost Lamb Association, currently the president of North Point Bible College and Seminary, my approach to a new believer is I want to put an accurate version of the Bible in their hands that they can both read and understand. And so I highly recommend the New King James Version. If you're a person listening to me and you find the Elizabethan English of the King James Version a hurdle to your understanding, consider the New King James Version. It's almost identical, other than a lot of the archaic language has been translated to be made more readable. One of the things that I also want to point out to you, as a matter of fact, I brought it with me today. I hold it in my hands. I grew up on the King James Version of the Bible that I hold in my hands, and if I were to hold it upright, it would probably fall apart. But if I went through this with you, you would see that it is well marked, well read, and worn out. To my memory, this is the first quality Bible that I was given by my parents as a young boy. And it's all worn out now, but you would see that it's a Schofield. And it's a Schofield King James Version of the Bible. I love this Bible. This would be a Bible if the Lord tarries and I pass away, just as I fought to find one of my dad's precious Bibles. I would hope one of my 2 children or grandchildren would fight for Grandpa's first quality Bible. I think it was my dad in particular. But knowing my dad, my mom probably did the shopping and picked it out. Even my name still holds up on it. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but you know, Tiff Shuttlesworth. My parents presented me with this King James Schofield Bible, leather bound. I treasured it as a child. I treasure it now, as you can see, even though I took that all through Bible college. That's what I used through all of my years in Bible college. And God knows how many times I've read and wept and prayed through the pages of this Bible. It is precious to my heart. So I love the King James Version, but I also love my followers and students enough that if you find, I did find by me, but if you find the Elizabethan English a little too archaic or difficult, try the New King James Version. It's almost identical, just a little more readable. Number 3 on the list is the English Standard Version, the ESV. The ESV is actually very similar to the NASB because it also has a literal formal equivalence translation, but they did a better job, as was their focus. They wanted to have the accuracy of the New American Standard Bible, but the committees, they wanted to address the readability factor that the NSAB was being accused of being so strict to word by word that they had produced an accurate Bible that was not necessarily the most readable Bible. So the ESV is very similar to the NASB, except the translators did a great job in trying to make it a little more readable. It was originally published in 2001. A new edition was published in 2009. And in many circles of Christian academia, the ESV has replaced the NASB for many who prefer a Bible that is dynamic, formal equivalence, word by word, but with the readability of a dynamic. And the ESV is actually a revision of the RSV. I actually had a question come in. Someone asked me, I have a Bible that has RSV on it. Well, the ESV is just a revision of the RSV, and if you're trying to decide between the two, the ESV is newer and many would consider better. It's written in a very modern English, yet many readers find that it reminds them, which some of you would like. Many people think that the reading of the ESV has the flow and poetry of the King James Version of the Bible. It is modern, but it has high standards of being pure and faithful in gendered language found in original texts and some of the older translations. Number 4, the New International Version, or the NIV. The NIV is a dynamic translation. Again, dynamic means thought for thought. Formal equivalence means word for word. The NIV is a dynamic translation. The NIV translator's concern was communicating the meaning in a way that was readable in English, even if it meant a slight departure from original wording. The NIV was the second Bible that I added to my collection. When I went to Bible college, I only had, matter of fact, I'm going to finish out the study with this Old Faithful in my hands. Actually feels good, not to mention it's about 27 pounds lighter than the one I typically hold. But the second Bible that I owned as a first-year student in Bible college was I purchased an NIV Bible. And I found it to be very readable after a lifetime of reading 18th century Elizabethan English, which I love its flow and poetry, but I remember getting an NIV and I felt like I got saved all over again and had a Bible for the very first time. Because the NIV was actually designed to be easy to read, easy to understand, especially, listen carefully, because this perhaps is one of the most significant things about the NIV in its translation that I would want you to know. They put a strong emphasis upon international readability. What do I mean by that? There are a lot